Have you ever felt like you're a magnet for chaos? Like no matter how much peace you try to cultivate, the same draining people keep resurfacing, people who poke at your calm, chip away at your clarity, and leave you questioning your own sanity. It's not just coincidence. Sometimes it feels like chaos knows your name. It knows where you live. And worst of all, it knows how to get under your skin. But what if the real issue isn't what they're doing? What if the issue is what you're silently allowing? You see, some people seem completely immune to toxic energy. It doesn't stick to them. It doesn't even try, not because they're louder, harsher, or more confrontational, but because they've become unreachable to it. And that kind of transformation, it doesn't start with shouting. It starts with stillness. It begins in the quiet corners of your mind, with how you think, how you carry yourself, and what you simply stop responding to. This isn't just about behavior. It's about being, about internal rewiring, about nervous system clarity, and at the core of it all, the timeless wisdom of Stoic detachment. So if you've ever found yourself stuck in the same emotional patterns, exhausted by people who seem to sense your energy like predators smell blood, then stay with me, because what you're about to learn won't just shift your mindset. It might change everything. 1. The inner shift that ends toxic cycles. Most people think of boundaries as a defense, a shield, a set of bold words, and strong exits. But Stoicism teaches something deeper. True boundaries don't begin with what you say to them. They begin with what you stop accepting within yourself. They're not just lines drawn in sand. They're states of being, quiet, grounded, unshakable. And they aren't built by force. They're built by clarity. Marcus Aurelius never spoke of demanding respect from others. He spoke of commanding order within. Epictetus didn't tell us to silence other people. He told us to silence the chaos inside. Why? Because the power to repel disorder doesn't come from controlling the outer world. It comes from mastering your inner one. In modern terms, this is called internal coherence, a nervous system that doesn't tremble under pressure, a mind that doesn't twist itself to please, a heart that doesn't crave validation from volatility. Toxic people aren't random. They're drawn to something, a frequency in your energy, a signal in your openness, a softness in your emotional availability. They don't just feed on weakness. They feed on your need to explain yourself, your impulse to prove your worth, your fear of walking away without closure. But something radical happens when you stop doing all of that. When you stop performing, when you stop proving, when you stop reacting, your nervous system shifts from high alert to calm, from reactivity to resilience, from chaos to home. And that shift, it may be invisible to the outside world, but it changes everything. Because the moment you begin to anchor yourself in breath, stillness, discipline, and presence, you stop sending out the signal that invites chaos in the first place. This isn't abstract. It's biological. It's stoic. It's power rebuilt from the inside out. Every time you choose silence over outburst, pause over impulse, values over emotion, you rewire your entire emotional reality, and your life starts to change. We ended the last section with a quiet truth. When your energy shifts, The people who once fed on your chaos no longer recognize you. That's the paradox of growth. Your strength doesn't come from pleasing others, it comes from integrity. You begin to retrain your body to understand that not every raised voice deserves your attention. Not every emotional storm warrants your presence. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you become someone else. Someone unavailable to dysfunction. Someone unrecognizable to toxicity. Toxic people don't leave your life because you force them out. They vanish because the version of you they once clung to no longer exists. You don't just stop resonating with their chaos, you start radiating something they can't manipulate, can't grasp, can't even reach. And that, right there, is the most powerful shift. Instead of asking, why do these kinds of people keep showing up in my life? You begin to ask, what part of me was making space for them to begin with? That question, it's not easy. It takes courage, brutal honesty, ownership without shame. But once you truly ask it, once you face it without flinching, you step into a power that doesn't need to push back or defend itself. It simply rises. Because at the end of the day, real boundaries, they aren't announced, they are embodied. When your mind is still, your values are clear, and your energy is no longer up for negotiation, the world responds differently to you. Toxic people don't leave because you told them to. They leave because you became the boundary. And in that deep stillness, you don't just protect your peace. You become it. Point to what you focus on. You become a fierce, a timeless truth that both Stoic philosophy and modern neuroscience agree on. One that we often forget. You become what you repeatedly give your attention to. Seneca warned us, if we allow our minds to be scattered in every direction, we lose ourselves long before we lose any battle. And today, neuroscience backs that up. It's called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on experience and attention. Whatever you focus on consciously or unconsciously grows stronger, which means this. If your thoughts are constantly wrapped around toxic people trying to predict their next insult, decode their passive aggression, or replay their cruel words, you are literally training your brain to live in that chaos. Over time, this shapes your nervous system. You become hypervigilant, emotionally reactive, and neurologically wired to expect pain, even in calm moments. And this isn't weakness, it's biology. Your brain doesn't care about justice. It adapts to whatever it experiences most. But here's the turning point. Once you understand this, you regain control, because attention isn't just something that gets stolen. It's a lever, one you can learn to pull. And when you begin to shift that lever inward, away from the noise and toward your center, that's when transformation begins. Not out there, not in them, within. Your focus is your most powerful currency. It shapes your emotional climate, your physical vitality, your ability to think clearly, and your experience of every relationship you're in. So the moment you start anchoring that focus on your breath, your posture, your routines, your discipline, your stillness, you initiate something extraordinary. A transformation rooted not in resistance, but in self-command. You stop feeding the emotional machinery that toxic people rely on to keep you reactive. You start cultivating something they can't touch, internal coherence. And through the lens of Stoicism, coherence is alignment. It's the sacred state where your values, your logic, and your actions move as one. Let's continue from that place of internal coherence, because once you become internally governed, everything begins to change. You begin to choose your words. With intention, you choose when to speak, when to remain silent, when to act, and when to walk away not from impulse or emotion, but from principle. This is what it truly means to be self-regulating. And when you reach that state, toxic people begin to lose access to you, not because you blocked them, but because you no longer meet them at the frequency where their dysfunction thrives. It's tempting to think that the answer is to cut people off completely. But real transformation isn't about removing people. It's about removing the emotional fuel that keeps the dysfunction alive. Stoicism teaches this clearly. You are not responsible for what others do, but you are entirely responsible for how you respond. And that response doesn't begin with your words. It begins long before with where your attention lives. Behavioral science backs this up. When behaviors stop being reinforced, they start to fade. If someone's manipulation, guilt-tripping, or emotional power plays no longer provoke a reaction from you, the game collapses. Why? Because the reward, the emotional access to your nervous system, is gone without ever needing to declare war. You've quietly changed the rules of engagement. And suddenly, the things that once held you hostage start losing their power. Not because they stopped pulling, but because you stopped responding. This isn't a quick fix. It's a quiet, daily discipline. But over time, something powerful begins to take root. You stop scanning every room for threats. You stop carrying the weight of other people's moods. You stop explaining your peace to people who are addicted to conflict. Your nervous system starts to recalibrate. Your mind becomes still. Your decisions become clearer. And the people who once drained you, they feel the difference. They may not know what changed, but they'll sense the shift. You're not as reactive, not as accessible, not as easy to provoke. You've tuned your frequency to a different rhythm, one that their chaos cannot survive in. What once entangled you now repels. What once demanded your attention now fades into irrelevance. Because in the end, freedom isn't about fighting the chaos. It's about refusing to feed it. You don't have to win the war to be free. You just have to stop showing up for battles that were never yours to begin with. And when you finally do that, you realize peace was never about controlling what happens around you. It was always about mastering what lives within you. 3. Let silence shield your strength in a world addicted to instant reactions. Silence is often misunderstood. People assume it's weakness, passivity, avoidance. We're taught to speak fast, defend quickly, clarify our stance, and face conflict head-on. But what if silence isn't a retreat? What if silence is a kind of mastery? What if, instead of being passive, it's the most powerful expression of self-command? The Stoics knew this deeply. True power doesn't need to raise its voice. It doesn't need to argue. It simply doesn't flinch when someone tries to manipulate you, provoke you, or pull you into emotional chaos. Your body responds instantly. Your nervous system kicks into high alert. Your heart races, your muscles tighten, and your brain specifically, the prefrontal cortex, which controls logic and decision-making, begins to shut down. That's the fight, flight, or freeze response. And it's why arguments spiral, why clarity disappears, why you later think, "Why did I say that?" Because in those moments, you're not responding with wisdom. You're reacting from survival. But here's where your power begins. And that pause, just a breath, just a moment, can change everything. When you choose not to respond immediately, you interrupt the automatic loop. You give your nervous system the chance to do something radical, recalibrate. Cortisol levels begin to drop. Your rational mind comes back online. And most importantly, you regain access to yourself. This isn't suppression. This is sovereignty, silence. In this context, isn't about shutting down. It's about tuning in. It's a quiet but firm declaration. I see what's happening, but I will not hand over my peace to it. This is where silence becomes a boundary, not the kind you announce, explain, or argue for, but the kind you embody. Most people think boundaries must be spoken out loud, set like rules, defended like walls. But the most powerful boundaries don't need explanation. They're not heard, they're felt. And silence, when grounded in clarity, becomes the loudest boundary of all. It starves the drama of attention. It denies the aggressor their control. It whispers, "You no longer have access to me. Not because I fear you, but because I've outgrown your game." From a Stoic perspective, silence is strength under pressure. Epictetus reminded us that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. But he wasn't just giving conversation advice. He was teaching us restraint. He was pointing to a way of living where we no longer dance. Every time someone beats the drum of provocation, when you no longer feel the urge to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you, you've reached a new level of inner mastery. You've reclaimed your power without raising your voice, without engaging in emotional combat. And this shift, it doesn't just empower you. It confuses those who once fed on your reactivity. Toxic individuals depend on emotional access. They feed on your defensiveness. They thrive on your justifications, your explanations, your attempts to make them understand. But when you offer them nothing, no argument, no energy, no reaction, your silence becomes their mirror. And they don't like what they see. They feel it. They sense that something's changed. They realize the door they used to walk through is gone. You didn't slam it. You dismantled it. And what's more, silence trains your nervous system to detach with dignity. It teaches your body that not every conflict is worth the physiological price. You stop rushing to fix, to defend, to clarify. Instead, you start observing, breathing, and letting others reveal themselves without pulling you into their storms. This is emotional immunity, not born of cold indifference, but forged through intentional detachment. There is quiet power in not responding, in watching someone try to provoke you and choosing to remain anchored. In realizing that not every invitation to conflict deserves an RSVP, because real strength, it's not measured by how loud you can be in battle. It's measured by how little of yourself you give to battles that don't matter. So the next time you feel that rising urge to correct, to defend, to win the argument. Pause. Inhale. Say nothing. Let that moment move through you like wind through branches. And something unexpected will happen. It will fade. The bait will dissolve. The drama will evaporate. And you'll still be standing unchanged, untouchable. Because silence isn't weakness. It's wisdom in motion. It's the sign that you've shifted from reactive to sovereign, from provoked to unshakable. And eventually, the people who once drained you, they'll either rise to meet your new energy or they'll fade drifting away in search of their next storm. You don't have to prove your growth. You don't have to argue your evolution. Just become so still, so centered, so completely rooted in your own energy that even your silence becomes untouchable. That's where the Stoic lives, not floating above the world, pretending to be unaffected, but standing firmly within the world, unmoved by its noise. For when you align, chaos can't stay. There's a subtle but powerful truth, one that both modern neuroscience and ancient Stoic wisdom quietly agree on. We are always communicating, even in silence, especially in silence, not just with our words but with our presence, your breath, your posture, the tension in your shoulders, the steadiness or shakiness in your tone, the stillness or turbulence of your emotions. All of it emits a frequency. These signals don't disappear into the air. They're felt, absorbed, reacted to by everyone around you, thanks to things like mirror neurons and subconscious pattern recognition. People begin to attune to the energy you broadcast, often without even realizing it. So if your internal state is anxious, chaotic, or dysregulated, don't be surprised when chaos keeps knocking. You're not cursed. You're not unlucky. You're simply resonating with what you haven't yet outgrown. And no, this isn't fluffy spiritual talk. This is physiology. When your nervous system is constantly on edge, when your thoughts are cluttered, and your emotions hijack you in an instant, you begin sending out a frequency that dysfunction naturally recognizes. Toxic people, manipulators, emotional agitators. They feel at home in that kind of energy. They don't need to hear your words, they can read your openness. They sense your emotional availability, your need to explain, your impulse to overextend. And if you're not grounded, they will take advantage of it, not always out of cruelty, but because that's what disorder does. It seeks out more of itself. But here's where everything begins to shift. The moment you begin aligning your inner world with clarity, restraint, and self-respect, the outer landscape around you starts to transform. Not because other people suddenly become enlightened, but because you've stopped offering them a foothold. The Stoics taught that it's not events that disturb us, it's our perception of them. In the same way, external chaos doesn't define your life. Your inner state does. And when you regulate your inner state, you stop vibrating at the frequency that chaos can cling to. From a physiological standpoint, this alignment begins by stabilizing your nervous system. That's the foundation. Practices like deep diaphragmatic breathing, cold exposure, periods of solitude, physical training, and cultivating mental stillness. These aren't trends, they're tools that help you anchor into your body and retrain your response patterns. Instead of reacting from habit, You begin responding with intention. Your reflex to explode fades. Your urge to prove disappears, and your presence becomes calm. Not a performative calm, but a disciplined, earned calm. The kind of calm that says, I know who I am, and I don't bend for noise. That calm becomes your shield. It becomes the invisible gatekeeper of your life. People who thrive on emotional chaos, they find no entry point, no crack to sneak through, no trigger to pull, no opening to manipulate. They may try to awaken the old version of you, but that version no longer shows up. And when they realize there's no reward left, no reaction to feed on, they quietly drift away, not because you pushed them, but because there's nothing left for them to hold on to. And then something else starts happening. You begin attracting differently. Not by force, not by effort, but by resonance. You begin drawing in people who value peace, who live with presence, who practice discipline. And maturity begins to recognize you not through noise, but through presence. People are drawn to the quiet gravity of someone who doesn't need to shout. You're not chasing validation. You're not performing strength to win approval. You're simply living at a frequency that speaks for itself. And that's what makes your presence powerful. It reflects the internal order you've spent time and effort building. That's why true boundaries aren't just external lines drawn in sand. They are internal standards, deeply encoded into how you move, how you breathe, how you exist. Your most unbreakable boundary isn't what you say. It's the energy you withhold. When your nervous system stops dancing for dysfunction, chaos loses its invite. When your mind stops craving emotional noise, the noise fades. When you stop explaining yourself to people who never truly listened, they stop asking for explanations. The Stoics had a name for this: living in accordance with nature. But not nature out there. Your nature, when your outer life begins to mirror the calm, intentional order of your inner world. You are no longer a prisoner to circumstance. You become the architect of your reality. And from that grounded place, you no longer feel anxious about who walks in or out of your life. Because you deeply know that anything not aligned with your truth will naturally fade. So if you truly want to change the people, energy, and experiences you attract, don't start by fixing the world. Start by changing your frequency. Regulate your inner chaos. Reclaim your attention. Realign with what is steady, what is honest, and what is rooted in your values. Because your brain and body are always asking the same quiet question of everything they encounter. Does this match me? And when the answer becomes no to anything, that drains, distracts, or disrespects your peace, the people who once fed on your imbalance will no longer recognize who you've become. That's not rejection. That's evolution. And the best part, you won't have to say a word. Your energy will speak for you. 5. Protect your lane. Preserve your power. There is a quiet nobility in choosing to stay in your lane, especially in a world that celebrates loud opinions, emotional overreach, and attention-seeking. The Stoics taught this well. The most meaningful kind of power, it isn't external. It's internal. It's your reason, your will, your response. What belongs to others, their actions, their emotions, their chaos, is none of your concern. And interestingly, Modern neuroscience agrees. Every single day, your brain wakes up with a limited reservoir of attention, clarity, and cognitive energy. That's your bandwidth. And the moment you spend it obsessing over someone else's behavior, trying to fix them, decode their passive aggression, or shape how they see you, you're not just distracted. You're draining yourself. And that's the subtle danger. Your attention isn't just what you look at. It's what you slowly start to become. From a biological perspective, attention is fuel. It drives behavior. When your focus is locked on yourself, your goals, your habits, your growth, your brain rewards you with dopamine, the motivation molecule. That deep sense of progress and purpose. It doesn't come from chasing drama. It comes from showing up for yourself. So the moment your inner dialogue shifts from, "Why are they like this?" to, "How can I refine myself today?" you start rewiring your brain. You create a new internal feedback loop. You build emotional momentum. And without even realizing it, your entire nervous system starts to associate peace with progress. And that one shift, it changes everything. Because suddenly, drama doesn't feel exciting anymore. It feels exhausting. Gossip sounds hollow. Emotional bait becomes boring. And the people who once had the power to hijack your mood, they start to feel irrelevant. Not because they changed, but because you did. And the most remarkable part? That change didn't come from a big confrontation. It didn't require a dramatic exit. It came from redirection, quiet, consistent, inner redirection. This is where Stoicism becomes intensely practical. The idea of oikeiosis, the Stoic principle of aligning with what is truly yours, means coming home to yourself. It means not wasting your soul trying to manage someone else's chaos. When you truly begin to mind your own business, in the deepest possible sense, you stop trying to rescue others from themselves. You stop reacting to things you were never meant to control. You become boring to toxic people. Why? Because you no longer offer the one thing they crave, your emotional availability. There's also a psychological phenomenon called selective attention. Your brain filters out what it deems irrelevant. So when you start focusing on your growth, your discipline, your vision, you stop noticing emotional landmines. You stop catching every passive-aggressive jab. You no longer overthink every shift in someone's tone. You become unavailable not because you're cold or defensive, but because your awareness is too engaged in building something real. And that's the Stoic answer. Don't engage the noise. Rise above it. Not by pretending the noise doesn't exist, but by becoming so anchored in your center that it simply can't reach you. You don't need to set loud boundaries. You don't need to explain yourself. You just stop showing up to battles that have nothing to do with your path. And over time, the people who once fed on your energy lose interest. You're no longer reactive. You're no longer available to play roles in their narrative. You've become emotionally unhookable. And that isn't disconnection. That's discipline. Because the beauty of minding your own business doesn't lie in isolating yourself from the world. It lies in anchoring so deeply within. You no longer abandon yourself for approval, for comfort, or to manage someone else's dysfunction. You protect your energy. You sharpen your focus. You simplify your life. Because in the end, peace isn't found. It's produced. It's the result of daily decisions. To walk away from conversations that tighten your chest. To refuse to explain your silence. To be more invested in your inner world than in the opinions of people who don't even understand their own. You don't rise by pushing others down. You rise by refusing to be pulled into what doesn't serve you. So stay in your lane. Protect your power. And let those who thrive on chaos find their noise met with silence. That silence, it isn't avoidance. It's elevation. Stoic elevation. And it needs no announcement. 6. If it costs your peace. It's too expensive. A chronic stress is not just some emotional inconvenience. It is one of the most corrosive forces known to both body and mind. Neuroscience now confirms what Stoic philosophy has long understood. Disorder in the internal world bleeds into everything. Your memory, your focus, your immune system, your ability to sleep, even the speed at which you age. And one of the most powerful sources of chronic stress, unstable, unhealthy relationships. The kind that drag you into emotional firefights. The kind that keep your nervous system constantly on alert. The kind that make you forget who you are. That's why protecting your peace isn't some poetic ideal, a biological necessity and a Stoic responsibility. When you live in a state of constant anticipation, bracing for the next insult, scanning for the next manipulation, walking on eggshells in emotional minefields, your nervous system adapts, but not in the way you want. It doesn't become stronger. It becomes reactive, not resilient. It wires your mind for defense, not discernment. You begin to move through your day ready to flinch, not ready to lead. And this is where the Stoic mind understands something most people miss. Peace is not passive. It's not something you stumble into by accident. It's something you choose and then defend. And defending your peace, it doesn't always look like confrontation. More often than not, it looks like restraint. It looks like walking away when your ego wants to argue, like choosing silence when your pride wants to make a point, like exiting a conversation when your chest tightens and your thoughts begin to spiral. Stoicism teaches us to guard the gates of our mind. You may not be able to control the storm, but you always have the choice of whether or not to step into it. That's the shift. When you start making peace your priority, dysfunction stops feeling like something familiar and starts feeling like friction. You stop compromising just to keep the room calm. You stop twisting your values just to make someone else comfortable. And your brain begins to learn something radical. Safety is not found in approval. It's found in alignment. When your actions, words, and values are in sync, you no longer need the world's permission to feel grounded. That's not rebellion. That's sovereignty. And that sovereignty, it starts showing up in your daily choices. You become more careful about who you let into your emotional space. You become more selective with your time, how long you stay in environments that drain you. You start asking harder questions about what's truly worth your energy. Peace becomes your filter. If something costs your clarity, your physical well-being, or your emotional integrity, you begin to see it for what it is, too expensive. This isn't about running from discomfort. It's about refusing to fund your own erosion And here's the beautiful part. Over time, these choices accumulate. They rewire your system. The triggers that used to light up your anxiety, they start to fizzle. The people who once knew exactly how to bait you, their tools lose their edge. You stop bleeding energy into problems you were never meant to solve. And yes, toxic people notice. But not because you made a dramatic exit. Not because you posted your boundaries online. They notice because you're no longer accessible. You've stopped responding on cue. You've stopped playing the role they cast you in. This is the essence of Stoic detachment. Not coldness but clarity. Not shutting down emotionally but mastering it. It's realizing that no one is entitled to access your nervous system. That the only permission you truly need is your own. That real strength isn't domination. It's disciplined self-preservation. So when someone asks, "Why have you changed? Why are you so quiet now? Why don't you respond like you used to?" Don't explain. Let your peace answer for you. Let your absence from unnecessary battles speak louder than confrontation ever could. Let your composure be your closing statement. Because in the end, protecting your peace isn't about exile. It's about elevation. It's about moving forward into a space where the noise can't follow, where the versions of you that tolerated chaos are left behind and replaced by something calmer, stronger, sharper. Peace isn't something you beg for. It's something you build. Once you've built peace, your life starts to shift. Not because the world becomes quieter, but because you do. Not because the people around you suddenly evolve, but because their chaos no longer finds a mirror in you. And that, right there, is the quiet kind of power that rewrites everything from the inside out. 7. Transform quietly. Rise invisibly. Real transformation doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't scream for validation. It doesn't chase applause. It doesn't beg to be witnessed. True growth, the kind that reshapes your nature, not just your habits, happens quietly. It happens invisibly, far from the noise, far from the spotlight. And this isn't just philosophical poetry. It's grounded in hard science. Neuroscience calls it neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to rewire itself through repetition and focused attention. But that rewiring process requires more than just effort. It requires space. Space from distraction, space from emotional chaos, and most crucially space from the people who benefited most from the older, more malleable version of you. From a Stoic lens, this silence isn't isolation. It's incubation. It's a deliberate withdrawal, not to escape life, but to return. Stronger. Marcus Aurelius wrote for himself, not for public applause. Seneca wrote letters, yes, but always emphasized developing one's reason and integrity before seeking anyone's approval. This kind of internal sharpening doesn't happen in noise. It happens in stillness. And stillness isn't the absence of sound. It's the absence of noise. Noise like the pressure to explain yourself, to be understood, to perform your growth for others. Because when you finally walk away from toxic people or reactive environments, your nervous system can finally exhale. That silence, it's not empty. It's full. Full of reflection, full of recalibration, full of quiet rebuilding, with no tension to decode, no manipulation to untangle, Your mind can finally begin to align. And when clarity arrives, growth takes root. It's tempting, especially in the early stages of personal change, to want to prove it, to post about it, to show your doubters you've changed, to say, "Look at me now." But here's the danger. Premature exposure invites premature judgment. And that judgment can shake a transformation that isn't yet solid. The Stoics remind us we must first govern ourselves before we try to shape the external world. If your new identity still needs to be defended, it is not yet fully yours. That's why silence becomes sacred. In silence, you solidify the unseen, your new habits, your mental clarity, your emotional discipline. They don't need to be broadcast to be real. They need to be practiced, repeated, protected. That's how they gain strength. Because transformation is not a performance. It's a process. And processes require time, time to settle, time to mature, time to grow, without interruption. Silence is also a shield, especially during this vulnerable phase. Toxic people, whether they realize it or not, often sense your evolution. They feel you pulling away. They sense you thinking differently, becoming more intentional. Not because they're intuitive, but because your change threatens their access. They don't necessarily want you stuck out of hatred. They just need you unchanged to keep their control. So they test you. Not with dramatic blow-ups, but with familiar patterns. They invite you back into old dynamics. They poke subtly, trying to make you react the way you used to. That's why your silence must be a vow. Not a punishment, not a tactic, but a quiet promise to hold your ground. While the new version of you is still finding its legs, because every time you explain yourself too soon, engage with chaos too quickly, or seek validation too soon, you dilute your momentum. You give away what is still settling inside you. You interrupt the rewiring. You blur the clarity. But if you wait, if you protect the process long enough, something beautiful begins to happen. The change becomes undeniable. Not because you told anyone, but because you became someone else. Your posture shifts, your tone quiets, your reactions slow. The need to prove or defend simply vanishes. And the people who once had full access to the reactive, overstretched, emotionally raw version of you, they no longer know how to reach you. Not because you built walls, but because you built depth. You now speak the language of presence, not performance. And to those who rely on chaos, that's a language they can no longer understand. That is the Stoic reward. Not applause, not recognition, but mastery. You no longer need anyone to see it. You only need to be it. Because when your transformation is forged in solitude, not in spectacle, it becomes unshakable. You don't rise to impress others. You rise because you've outgrown the version of you that couldn't yet hold this peace. And that is a private triumph no one can take from you. So embrace the silence. Let it do the work that words can't. Let it be your classroom, your mirror, your sanctuary. And trust this, when you emerge from that stillness, you won't need to explain anything. The results will speak in a language only the disciplined can hear. 8. Speak less, show more. There's a brilliant mechanism in your brain called salience detection. It filters through the endless noise of life to identify what truly matters. And here's the key. Your brain doesn't lock onto what's loud. It sharpens its focus on what's real. People operate the same way. Eventually, they stop listening to your declarations and start watching your demonstration. They stop caring about what you say you'll become and start reacting to what you've already embodied. That's why, when you begin rising out of toxic patterns or unstable dynamics, the most powerful move isn't to argue. It's not to announce your shift. It's to align. When your actions start matching your values, when your daily choices reflect your internal convictions, people feel the shift. Not because you said it, but because they sense it. There's a weight to consistency, a gravity to someone who no longer needs to prove anything. And neuroscience backs this up. Every time you choose a behavior that protects your peace, whether that's walking away from conflict, staying loyal to your morning routine, or refusing to take the bait in someone else's emotional game, your brain rewards you, not metaphorically, chemically. Dopamine reinforces that decision, and over time, those decisions stack, not just into habits, but into identity. You become someone your future self can trust, and that trust, that's everything. Because toxic people thrive in the space between who you say you are and how you actually behave. If you say you've set boundaries, but you still answer their calls and explain yourself endlessly, they know you haven't changed. If you say you value peace, but you still get pulled into petty arguments, they see the gap, and they will use it. Their power lies in your ambiguity. But the moment your actions become clear, quiet, consistent, their access begins to dissolve. Because you can't manipulate clarity. You can't twist discipline. This is where Stoic philosophy whispers its timeless wisdom. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Let your character do the talking. You don't need to post about your peace, live it. You don't need to declare your transformation, become it. You don't need to shout your boundaries, move in such alignment with your values that your presence speaks louder than words. When your actions become your message, you free yourself from the exhausting tug of war of needing to explain or justify your life. You no longer need to convince anyone of your worth. You no longer feel compelled to defend your evolution to people who are only searching for cracks, for flaws to poke at, for weaknesses to exploit. Don't. Reserve your energy for what actually matters. Your work, your growth, your values, your mission. Because here's the beauty of quiet strength. It automatically organizes your relationships for you. The emotionally immature, they drift away, not because you banished them, but because they can no longer recognize or relate to the version of you who refuses to be destabilized. They miss the old signals, the reactivity, the drama, the chaos you used to entertain. Now, there's nothing for them to hook into, only stillness. And to those who rely on emotional bait, stillness is unbearable. But the right people, the ones who are grounded, growth-oriented, emotionally mature, they'll recognize something rare in you. They'll feel safe around your clarity. They'll respect your restraint. Because real maturity doesn't seek performance. It seeks presence. And your presence will carry a quiet authority that doesn't need explanation. This is what it means to live in alignment, to be so committed to your internal peace that external chaos doesn't even register as a threat. To move through life without broadcasting every victory, without defending every choice, without reacting to every jab. To build a reputation, not on noise, but on depth. Because in the end, the people who matter, they won't ask for an explanation. They'll simply watch your life. And what they'll see is someone who doesn't negotiate with what drains them. Someone who doesn't argue with noise. Someone who lets their results speak so clearly. Even their silence carries weight. So live like that. Let the people who doubted you watch your evolution in silence. Let the ones who underestimated you sit with the weight of your absence. And most importantly, let your own mind feel the deep satisfaction of integrity. Because there is no louder voice than a life lived with purpose, no clearer signal than consistency, and no stronger defense against chaos than the quiet strength of someone who no longer needs to be heard. In order to be known. Let your results speak. Let your growth echo. And let your silence become the most undeniable truth in the room. 9. Master yourself, and the world bows. Quiet livers, a concept shared by both neuroscience and Stoic philosophy that defines the essence of true strength, coherence. It's the state where your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions no longer compete. They align. They move as one, and when that happens, everything within you begins to stabilize. Your mind sharpens, your body relaxes, your decisions carry more weight. You no longer chase peace, you become it. This inner alignment isn't flashy, it's not loud. It's the quiet consequence of choosing discipline over distraction. Self-respect over people-pleasing, wisdom over reaction. Every choice you make in that direction reinforces your inner order. And when you're centered like that, something powerful happens. The people who once fed on your instability slip away, not because you fought them off, but because there's nothing left in you that responds to their chaos. The Stoics taught, the wise man seeks harmony not with the world, but with himself. And when you live from that place, when your energy, your values, and your behavior are finally in sync, the world around you responds. New relationships appear, opportunities align, even unexpected moments of grace begin to flow in, not because of luck, but because of clarity. You're no longer leaking energy into things that never served you. So here's the truth. You don't have to fight toxic people to make them leave. You only have to stop aligning with what keeps you small. When you rise, they fall away. And in that silent evolution, you earn something no one can take. Your peace, your power, and a life that finally feels like yours. You don't need to chase peace. Just stop feeding what drains you. Align within. Act quietly, and let the rest fall away. If this message resonated with you, support the journey. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Stoic Capsule for more wisdom, clarity, and power in stillness. Because when you protect your peace, you don't just change your life, you change your legacy. See you in the next chapter. Stay grounded. Stoic Capsule.